All right, we'll stick with the Minnesota fraud scandal just a bit longer now on account of it's Christmas. And it's a Christmas gift that just kind of keeps on giving or stealing, depending on how you look at it. And we'll turn our attention to allegations concerning the region's local media outlets and their apparent complicity in enabling the massive welfare schemes to snowball. Outraged critics who work for news outlets throughout the state now coming out of the woodwork, and they claim they were told repeatedly by their bosses they couldn't hold Governor Tim Walz and his cronies accountable in the press for what was going on because if they ran any stories dealing with the area's Somali community, they would all be labeled as racists. Yeah, you got to play that race card. I get that. Meanwhile, a number of people, they're now taking it a bit further and vilifying the state's largest newspaper. They call that one the Minnesota Star-Tribune, and they claim that in part through their misleading headlines. This organization is nothing more than a front for Democrats, which has been repeatedly covering up important information, contorting the facts, and simply lying outright. Taking up just a notch, one congressman from the state's also pinning the blame on Minnesota's most widely read paper. Says that instead of maintaining journalistic integrity, like we do right here on the Roundup, and holding leaders such as Tim Walz and Ilhan Omar accountable for their roles in the massive taxpayer swindle, the paper has proven itself to be nothing more than a highly biased communist fish wrap. And now I kind of want fish for dinner. Now, when you take a closer look and peek under the hood, you can see that the congressman may have had a very valid point. See, the paper's CEO, it's a guy named Steve Grove, and he worked directly for the Walz administration as the governor's commissioner of employment and economic development. That was between 2019 and 2023, if memory serves correct, and if the teleprompter I'm looking at is correct. For their part, the Minnesota Star-Tribune says any notion that they're downplaying the fraud crisis in any way can be contradicted by making a simple Google search. They also claim they were the first organization to report that the Walz administration was withholding information related to the scandal, that they've been broken countless stories holding state leaders accountable for their oversight failures related to the massive theft, and that so far they've published more reporting about the Feeding Our Future fraud than any other media outlet in the country. Except maybe the News Roundup. In the meantime, the lack of valid coverage by the local media also seemingly being echoed on the national stage. One conservative watchdog group reporting that even as the scandal began to break and started growing by leaps and bounds, the major American news networks, they're all kind of downplaying the fraud angle and focusing their attention more on President Trump's response. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Throughout all of Minnesota, if radio and television stations, newspapers, and other media outlets have refrained from fair and comprehensive coverage of all that's happening in a state where virtually every citizen has reportedly been ripped off, I say thanks a million, or actually 9 million. Actually 9 billion. And here in the News Roundup newsroom, we are more than happy to pick up the slack. The past several days and weeks, we've been watching very carefully the stories coming out of Walsney land, and we are more than happy to share those stories with anybody who frowns upon fraud, corruption, and thievery. This Walz guy sounds like a pickpocket on steroids. And I would like to think that what's happening in Minnesota is kind of an isolated event, but, a number of Rounduppers, just like you and my pal Patty Kay, my buddy Eric as well, they've written in to point out similar issues percolating in Ohio, Oregon, and a bunch of other states as well. Now, our Christmas gift to you. We're going to keep unwrapping all we know about everything that's happening in Minnesota and our pilfered tax dollars. Look at the News Roundup as kind of a major motion picture starring Governor Tim Walz, along with his co-star, that state's Attorney General Keith Ellison, and special guest star, we can't leave her out, multi-millionaire Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. This has all the makings of one of those big, giant Hollywood blockbusters. And our producer Davey, if you don't mind, I know you're sitting in the background somewhere, grab us some popcorn and maybe a Dr. Pepper. And this time, go easy on the ice. It melts and gets kind of watery.